Hi, I'm Nicholas Tutora. Welcome to Tutora Time. While the Democrats in Congress are trying to get through their George Floyd Police Reform Act of 2020, and some of the things that are in it are quite troubling. We know that the left is no fan of the police department. They cry systemic racism, even though the numbers don't bear them out. In 2019, 19 unarmed black people were shot by police, as opposed to 29 unarmed white people were shot by police. So the left really promotes this narrative of police brutality when the facts actually don't bear it out. If you look at the millions of police patrols daily in the United States and the amount of offenses that happen along the lines of George Floyd, the numbers simply don't bear out for the left. But facts never stops them from anything. So one of the things they want to do is they want to lower the immunity of police. So right now, a police officer is protected on his job because obviously it's a dangerous job and you have to make split-second decisions. And they want to lower the bar of being able to sue people to hold them liable and guilty for offenses. It sounds good on paper, but the reality is people will bring all kinds of lawsuits. All you got to do is resist arrest of the police, and then when they try to exercise force on you, you're going to sue them as, overreacting to the situation.
Get back in the car. Get back in the car.
What you pulling me up for?
For going about 60 down Southfield, and then you just spun out right there.
No, I haven't.
I just saw you, and it's on camera. Sir, I'm going to ask you 2 more times. I need license, registration, and insurance.
And I need a supervisor.
I told you I am the supervisor.
Okay.
Sir.
You're not getting my license.
Have a seat in your car.
Okay, give me a
Have
supervisor.
a seat in your car. Sir, put your hands behind your back. Put your hands behind your back. Put your hands behind your back. 216 on point with it. You're gonna get tased! Get down! Get down!
I said I need a fucking supervisor.
Get up! Get out of the ground!
I need a supervisor. Oh, God. You're not gonna shoot me. I need a supervisor.
Drop it.
So that's really dangerous there. The banning of no-knock warrants. Rand Paul is for this. I have mixed emotions about it. In the Breonna Taylor case, there are witnesses who say that the police actually announced themselves. They want to ban the no-knock warrants in drug cases at the federal level. It's tricky. I mean, it's really a case-by-case circumstance. They also want to ban the police use of chokeholds. Again, this sounds good on paper, but you could see since George Floyd, a lot of states have banned the use of the chokehold, and you just watch the video, you see police wrestling with people because they can't put them in a chokehold.
Do me a favor, come over here. Then place your hands behind your back. What? Stay. Place your hands. Stop resisting! I got him. Keep the taser on. Stop resisting!
And I want to remind you that the DA in Los Angeles, Gascon, said you will not be prosecuted for resisting arrest. So for a police officer to have to fight on a daily basis, wrestle with a grown man on the ground for minutes, is not really something that we should expect the police to have to do. They're criminals for a reason. They're not obeying the law. And if a criminal knows the police officer can't put him in a chokehold and is limited into how he can respond, that's not going to limit the criminal's response. They're going to give the maximum response, and it's going to put the police officer in jeopardy. They talk about, how George Floyd, how police used violence against Floyd, a person they're supposed to protect. Well, really, they're supposed to be protecting us from criminals. They're supposed to be protecting law-abiding citizens from criminals. Their job is not really to go soft on criminals. And also, yes, it was a tragedy what happened to George Floyd, but George Floyd, the coroner's report, the toxicology report, shows that he died of an overdose of fentanyl. So when he was being arrested, he swallowed the fentanyl that he had on him. And according to the autopsy, according to the coroner, that's the thing that stopped his breathing, not the police officer kneeling on his neck. I mean, I think what the officer did was terrible, but the toxicology report shows that He stopped breathing because of a fentanyl overdose, which makes complete sense because fentanyl is an opioid like heroin. How people die in a heroin overdose is they stop breathing. Their respiratory system gets suppressed. And George Floyd was even saying, "I can't breathe," before the police put him in the back of the car. They also want a registry kept of police officer misconduct. And again, it sounds good, but if you start bringing frivolous lawsuits and then you have people on registries who they can never work, who's going to become a police officer? Nobody is going to be willing to risk their lives knowing that they could be sued, knowing that they're going to be jailed, knowing that their life is going to be destroyed. The other thing in the bill that's really interesting is they say no racial profiling. So that's pretty interesting since the left is now building this whole narrative of white supremacist terrorism. So I guess they can no longer have that. If they're consistent in what they say, we should never hear that term, white supremacist. We should never hear that the FBI and law enforcement are targeting white supremacy, right? Because white supremacy is immediately a racial description. What kind of supremacy? White supremacy. Of course, at the Capitol riot, Ashley Babbitt was shot dead, point blank in the neck. And there was no outcry over police brutality and how they could have subdued her without shooting her. Can you think of a reason why that might be? So they're defining people by their race and targeting them for that, which according to this bill says shouldn't be happening. The bill also wants to limit the military equipment that local police departments can use. If the people who are rioting and looting and burning things to the ground know the police can't pull out a strong force, they're more likely to continue rioting. It's really about protecting criminals and not protecting the citizens, which is a very strange priority that the left always has, except, of course, when it applies to them. When there was the riot on Capitol Hill, the left immediately called out 25,000 troops surrounding the Capitol. About 5,000 are still there. The Capitol is surrounded with fencing and razor wire. And that was because there was a couple of hundred people who broke in to the Capitol. So everything that the left is stripping from the defense of the general public, they have no problem keeping in place for themselves. The other thing that's really scary in this bill is they want to divert funds away from the police station into community-based policing. That's another term for really supporting gangs, funding gangs. In Seattle, they're paying an ex-gang leader $150,000 a year to be their liaison to the criminal community. We don't need non-official police forces patrolling our neighborhoods looking to enforce what they determine to be crimes. Look, overall, we know that the Democrats do not stand with the police force. They have no problem with letting people out of jail. And what they're going to do is, if you're a decent citizen and you're protecting yourself, they're going to prosecute you, not the criminal. The police have a really hard job. They walk into situations that people would never want to walk into. All of these kinds of bills and all of this kind of outcry about police brutality really lies in the hands of the individual. If you're not breaking the law in the first place, the police aren't going to hassle you. The bill outlaws the protective armor that police wear. What is the point of that except making it easier to kill a police officer?
And next to me here today, you see one of his SWAT vests. This is the same vest that he wore for 14 hours while on a massive manhunt for a man who had just been released from prison who promptly raped and killed his girlfriend. It is the same vest that he wore while responding to a man who had barricaded himself with weapons, threatening to kill his own children. But the real threat here is not the dangerous situations that my husband has seen in protecting his community. It is the fact that this bill, and by extension you, Mr. Speaker, want to take this vest off my husband's back. Because yes, what this bill does is take this kind of equipment off the backs of our men and women in uniform. Are you waking up at 2 a.m. going to respond to a gruesome murder? Are you missing your children's birthday parties to respond to gang shootings? What this bill ultimately does is defund the police.
Why shouldn't an officer be able to protect himself when going into a situation? AOC has been crying how the breach of the Capitol is the most traumatic thing that ever happened in her life. What does she think the people who live in these crime-ridden neighborhoods are going to feel when the criminals are turned loose and the police can't respond. These kinds of bills hurt the very people that they're meant to protect. Teach your children to respect the police. Don't wrestle with police. Don't go for their gun. A police officer is not a babysitter. They're there to enforce the law, and it's not their job to coddle you into submission. Obey the police orders, or once you don't, all bets are off. And this other nonsense that the left likes to push is that black people have to have this conversation about, if you're ever pulled over by a police officer, keep your hands on the wheel and, make sure you don't do anything weird. Every parent should have that conversation with their children. I've had it with mine. If a police officer pulls you over, make sure you keep your hands in view. Make sure they're on the wheel and make sure you follow their orders. Don't be reaching into your glove compartment or not cooperating. You're only asking for trouble. Their job is to enforce the law, and if you're breaking it, they're going to enforce it on you. Better policing is always a goal, but I don't believe this bill has anything to do with better policing. It has to do with dismantling the police. You're inviting people to break the law when you take away the kinds of responses the police can have. It's not about justice. We can't use this doublespeak where we dismantle the police department and we call it reform. Well, I'm Nicholas Tutora, and I'll talk to you again soon on Tutora Time. Hi everyone, it's Nicholas Tutora. Now more than ever, it's so important to keep free speech alive. So make sure you click the subscribe button so you can stay part of our conversation.